What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, as well as a new Madonna album. Indeed, we're moving on to Bedtime Stories, 1994. You're just going straight for the lap? I mean, she's been awake for 2 seconds. Nevertheless, once again, big shout out to Mark for sharing all the Madonna material, and the first track on Bedtime Stories is Survival. It's a single word title, though in this case less opaque than some other single word title tracks. Or not title tracks, but tracks with single title names. But yeah, survival, persistence, staying alive, which I think implicitly suggest adversity, danger, potential harm, or maybe actual harm, and thus finding your way to persist and to continue despite having a setback, feeling injured, or being attacked by others or your environment. So I feel like any of these concepts could play in a particular narrative, though they could also speak in a meta-reality or autobiographical sense to persisting in a career that by this point has spanned over a decade. Again, this album's 94, she got started in the early 80s, so, or at least, the earliest material that I reacted to, her debut album was early 80s, so yeah, ultimately I feel like this could play out on different levels, or maybe even multiple levels. Nevertheless, I'll see what I can pick up on a first listen. This is Madonna. The track is Survival, and it's the opening tune on her 1994 album, Bedtime Stories. Sweet song. It does feel like there's probably a lot of autobiographical sentiment there, and a very long fade, which, again, if you're going to fade, do a long one. So yeah, it feels like the whole song is essentially a chorus. Like, I don't remember what reaction it was. It was within the last week, though, where there's a track that started with a chorus, and then it went into the first verse and chorus, verse. But, a lot of songs that I've been familiar with over the year, they start with the first verse, and then you get the first iteration of the chorus, second verse, chorus comes back, and so on. So I remarked then that, like, oh, this one actually starts with the chorus and then goes into the first verse. But it feels like there's essentially two parts to the chorus, and maybe the second part, because of the way the music swells, is, I guess, more typically, or would be considered, the chorus in a more narrow sense of the term. But it feels like all the stanzas of the track repeat over the course of the tune. Nevertheless, again, it sounds like it's got to be on some level autobiographical, that people say things about me in the media. Maybe this album didn't sell as well as this other album. Maybe, it's perceived that, I don't have the spark that I had at the beginning of my career, whatever. But I'm here. I've, been up and down. I've gone all around, and I'm still going to live to tell my tale, which I was thinking that line in particular, the, living to tell, which, usually you get the full expression, living to tell your story, meaning if you perish, if you pass away, you can't talk about your perspective of what's happened. Other people will say what they think has happened, but the person that it happened to won't be able to give their side of it. So if you do survive, you live to tell your story. And I feel like the concept of a bedtime story, like, sure, sometimes bedtime stories are, traditional folk narratives, and they're, about motifs of culture and so on. But sometimes they relate to actual episodes in people's lives. And, like, let me tell you a story about when I was young, and that's the bedtime story. So it feels like already there's a bit of a syncing between the concept of this opening track and the title and perhaps concept of the album overall. So yeah, I like the way that matched up. And yeah, it has that early 90s, like, trip hop meets hip hop kind of feel. A bit R&B, rather, I should say, not so much trip hop, but hip hop meets R&B. And yeah, the vocals, they're not the biggest I've heard Madonna do, but they fit the mood and the atmosphere of the song quite well. And in general, it felt very pleasing and calm, which I suppose if you're fighting through and getting to the other side and living to tell your tale, whether it's heaven or hell, then you would have a degree of contentment and confidence in your persistence, in your tenacity, in your ability to continue on. So I feel like the feeling that she's conveying matches the sonic atmosphere well. So yeah, a cool album opener. Ultimately, it feels like sonically, and only with one track under our belt, so to speak, it's not too far away from the sonics of the previous album, but this track and the previous album do seem quite a bit far away from the more, let's say, dance floor 80s synth pop sound of her first couple records. So it's just, again, interesting to chart the evolution of her sound. And as I mentioned a couple times, there's a couple tracks ahead of this in the timeline, such as The Power of Goodbye, that I am familiar with, and I know that doesn't sound like this. So clearly there's more evolution, more different sonic paths that she's going to go down over time. So looking forward to all of that. At this point, Luca, we'll see what you do, but I am going to get up. I think you are as well. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time. Peace.